So I'm Jennifer Renn, and I'm actually coming to this from a very different perspective, not very, but a different perspective from Karen and Janet. I'm not an academic, right? I mean, I do research. I work at an interdisciplinary research institution at the Center for Applied Linguistics, and I'm a senior research associate there. And before I came to Cal, I also worked at an interdisciplinary research institute, the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. So explaining my research and helping my research integrate into different contexts is what I do all the time, right? So it's not so much taking the work I'm doing and trying to tailor it, but thinking about how my work and my perspective works with other people, right, who have very different backgrounds. So it's okay. I can just, I'll just grab my hands, it's fine. It's not worth it. I appreciate your effort. We can all pretend we're at the beach. It'll be great.
No, we're back at the beach.
That's okay. Technical difficulties are always the most fun. I know. Sorry. I'm a little tired. Oh, it's right there, actually. There we go. Okay. Thank you so much. Yay. All right. Hopefully. So, all right. So I'm going to talk about my experience at these two different places. Like I said, the Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute, I did my graduate work there. And just to give you some context on sort of my theoretical framework is I'm a sociolinguist, language variation. Interested, my dissertation was on African American English and style shifting. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. But I did my graduate work at FPG. I did a postdoc, an Institute of Education Sciences postdoctoral fellowship, which focused on early childhood education, right? So that's coming into a different kind of research. And then at the Center for Applied Linguistics here in DC, as I said, I'm a senior research associate, and I'm also the chair of the IRB. Who would have guessed it? That was nice to me. So yeah, everyone could be nice to me, right? When I became chair, everyone became so much nicer to me. It's funny. So I was at FPG for a number of years, and it was a great place to be because it was full of smart people doing great research on lots of topics involving young people. Right? So at FPG, they look at issues involving developmental disabilities, early care and education, international work, physical and social health, professional development, public policy and evaluation, race, ethnicity, linguistic, cultural, and socioeconomic diversity. So I highlighted the two that I worked in. But as you can see, there's a lot of research covering a lot of areas. Okay. So who works at FPG? Well, not a lot of linguists, right? Lots of developmental psychologists work there, not surprising. Psychiatrists, educators, anthropologists, social workers, audiologists, public health experts, statisticians. Trying to think if there were any other, besides the people that I worked with on my project, I don't really think there were any other linguists there. So during my graduate and my postdoctoral work, I was often trying to figure out how my background and my expertise would work and be an asset to the projects that were ongoing. So the project I worked on longest was the work I did for my master's, my dissertation, and beyond. And it was a study that I and many colleagues of mine have talked about at these conferences at NWAVE and LSA for the last several years. It was a study of African American English, right? And the final project was African American English and its relation to literacy skills in early adolescence. But it started out as a study of otitis media, right? Which is a kind of ear infection. And so the PI on the project, she was a speech pathologist. She wasn't a linguist, she wasn't a psychologist, speech pathologist. The project coordinator was a nurse. Right? And what had happened was they started this study and, a few years in, found that otitis media didn't have any ill effects. They were interested in early language and literacy, and there were no effects found. So they thought, okay, we have this corpus it was originally about 88 kids, and they were doing a really great job. So 70 of the kids continued through high school and beyond. We did a final interview with them when they were post-high school. So for 20 years, they kept up with these kids. And so, they're 7 or 8 years in and they're thinking, we're having such a great, our retention rate is amazing, what are we gonna do? And it became a linguistic study, right? So then that's when it turned to a study of vernacularity, African American English. So it was often a challenge to talk to a speech pathologist and a nurse and explain why we should care about morphosyntactic features, right? And so what we did in many cases was we looked at how those things tied to outcomes, right? To family factors, school factors, things like that. And that's something that psychologists, nurses, they can understand, right? And it made a valuable contribution to that project. And so that was pretty much what I did in my dissertation, right? I looked at style shifting in grade 6, and then for my dissertation I looked at style shifting and vernacularity from grades 1 through 8, and how that changed over time, and how that was linked to things like gender and mother's education, and who their peers were, all of those things, school demographics and all of that. And then during my postdoc, because it was an early childhood education postdoc, I extended that to look at how these, how language features were linked to early literacy skills, right? So in that way, I took my interest in variation and in style shifting and then linked it to all of these other areas, right? Which opened up a lot of doors for me, right? When I came to Cal, people were really excited that I was an IES postdoc, right? And that I had this kind of interest and background. So that was a way for me to sort of expand and integrate my work. I also worked on a project called the Family Life Project, which is a study of children from 700 rural families in North Carolina and 400 rural families in Pennsylvania. And they are looking at a ton of topics about outcomes for rural children. Right? So things that they're looking at are effects of economic conditions, mother's and father's language, caregivers' work schedules, household conflict. And there was some work on language. Like one of the projects that was ongoing when I came on was looking at father's use of emotion language with kids, right? And so again, this is coming from like a psychological perspective, not so much a linguistic perspective where you're looking at features. Okay. But I joined the project for a while and looked at the African American part of that sample. And again, looked to see whether there were any relationships between parent vernacularity and children's outcomes. Okay. Fun fact, when I was looking at this, I thought, oh, I would see a relationship, and there wasn't one. And I thought, oh my God, I was actually coming to LSA, and it was one of those things where it was like 2 weeks before, and I thought, oh my gosh, I have no results, and I was panicking. And then a friend of mine said, that's a great result. That means that if you have parents that use, that speak vernacular in their home, their children aren't doomed to not to learn how to read, right? It's great. What I did find is that complex syntax actually was a predictor of literacy skills. So that was a great finding. And a good reminder that sometimes you shouldn't go in, with set expectations on what you're looking for. Another thing that I did as part of this project was I took some of the work that I had, so in my dissertation work, right, a lot of what we did was look at vernacular features. We created a coding protocol, a transcription protocol, and I took that and I shared that with this project, and it became part of their work as well. So again, I was sort of taking knowledge and skills that I had built on a linguistic project, bringing it into a new one. So then I moved on to Cal. And at Cal, Cal does lots of things with English learners, world languages, testing and assessment, immigrant refugee integration, language and culture and society, language policy and planning. And they also have products and services, so lots of things like workshops and professional development and things like that. And again, you'd think Cal, the Center for Applied Linguistics, would be full of linguists, right? It's not. There are linguists there. So there are linguists, but there are also language testers. There are language policy analysts. There are EFL and ESL educators. So a lot of people actually who were former teachers that found that teaching wasn't for them, but they wanted to do work that affected and influenced students. people that do professional development, psychometricians, artists and designers, market researchers, right? So again, working with lots of different people from lots of different perspectives. And one of the things that was tough for me, right, is I had no background in testing. I didn't really have much interest in testing. Don't tell anyone at Cal that. But that's you know, the project that I came on to be part of, right, was part of this project. One of the big things Cal does is we create an English language proficiency test for K-12 students. Over 1 million students across the United States take it every year, right? So it's a big deal, right? It affects lots of kids' lives, right? So the goal is to provide standards-based assessments for English language learners across a consortium of 37 states in the US. And so when I came onto that project, again, there really weren't a lot of people coming at it from a linguistic perspective as I would, as a sociolinguist. So when I joined the project, people were actually really excited, which was nice, right? So the lead psychometrician was supposed to be looking at whether a student's home language, right, might affect their ability to answer a question or not, right? So when we are developing tests, we look to see if there are any cognates with Spanish, right, because most English learners in this country are Spanish. But certainly students come from lots and lots of backgrounds, and most of the teachers and people we work with aren't linguists. They're not really aware of language, families, and relationships. So I came onto that project and helped her delve into that question. We also have been doing comparability studies. The test is moving from paper to computer-based assessment. And so I've been helping to look at, you know, speaking samples, writing samples, things like that from a linguistic perspective to see if we're capturing the same kind and quality of language in both contexts, in paper and on the computer. So the first thing is what I just said, we're looking at the home language, and then the second one, we also looked at analyzing test items to see if they would preference certain language groups. I've also been trying to resurrect, Cal has a really, if I'm familiar with Cal, but it has a really strong history in sociolinguistics. So Ralph Fasold, Walt Wolfram, lots of big names started at Cal. And there's not a lot of money in sociolinguistics the way there is like in testing, right? So I'm trying to bring that back and incorporate my sociolinguistic perspective into the work that Cal does. And one of the things that a colleague and I are doing are looking at constructed dialogue and narrative speaking tasks as a way to identify students that are at really high levels of proficiency, which can be challenging. It's really easy to tell if a kid is not proficient or kind of proficient. When you get up to the pretty proficient and very proficient up in that higher level, it's hard to tease it apart. So that's one of the things that we're using our background in sociolinguistics to look at, and that's something that people are really appreciative and happy about. And then the other thing was looking at handwritten and keyboarded writing samples, and again, analyzing those linguistically. I've been transcribing, coding, much like I did in my work in African American English. So I was able to sort of take those skills and apply them. A couple of other projects, I'll make sure we have some time for questions, is that I'm director of a project that is working with the University District of Columbia. Right? They have a program to prepare aspiring STEM teachers, right, to be middle school science teachers in Washington, D.C. And so what I and my colleagues will bring to this project is we provide expertise on academic and content-related language. We look at the development of student language proficiency in the context of science writing. And we're also keeping in mind the special needs of English learners and students from diverse linguistic backgrounds. Right? So again, something that in the field of education often is overlooked. We're kind of providing that. And then other work, again, sort of trying to bring my background in linguistics is I've worked on an IES grant that also was helpful in my postdoc for IES. Worked on a white paper for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences Commission on Language Learning, right, which we were trying to provide context and vital information and data on issues surrounding language learning to the commission, right, and this is something that was pretty exciting to me because this would influence policy and what Congress decides in terms of language learning in the United States. And I'm working on a Cal practitioner brief on what teachers need to know about language variation, right? So this is, I think, incredibly exciting. Right? I think this is the kind of work that needs to be done. We come to conferences, we talk amongst each other, right? We understand we understand the systematicity of language. We understand that all grammars are equal, but teachers don't, right? My dad is a teacher. We've had many heated discussions about non-standard language and whether it's okay. So, this is another place where I'm able to bring my perspective and actually, talk about it in a way that will be helpful to teachers when they're dealing with diverse students, right? Linguistically diverse students. So, so again, this is very sort of different perspective from Janet and Karen, but I feel that it's been really exciting and challenging to talk about my work with all of these different people and all of these different contexts, but it's exciting, and I feel like it also has given me an opportunity to talk to people that don't normally think about linguistics in the way that we do, in the systematic way that we do all the time. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thanks, Jen.